Okay, good evening, CavanKerry Press community. I am your Marketing and Communications Director, Dimitri Reyes, and I'm so honored to be bringing this 30th virtual reading to the public. Just give it up for that. 30 virtual readings. We've been doing this since 2020. It is now the beginning of 2024. And I am honored to be ushering in this new book that has already been getting so much attention, Glitter Road by January Gill O'Neil. If you have not gotten this book again, if you've not gotten this book yet, or if you've already gotten it and you want to get it again, please do so. In the chat, I'm going to put in the link or the description if you're watching this on YouTube later on, a link in order to get that book. You're in for a lovely evening, folks. We're going to run things a bit differently today, where we usually have both readers read and then hold a Q&A with the audience at the end. We have a very special guest today with us, the gracious and the impeccable Diane Seuss. Everyone say hi to Diane Seuss. Hi, Diane Seuss. Thank you for joining
Yay,
us.
thanks, Diane. Yay!
Yay.
Thank you.
So the way it's going to run, I am going to pass it over to Dana momentarily, who will deliver the land acknowledgement. She'll kick it back over to me. I'll read the bios for both readers, and then Diane will have the rest of the evening to for us to all listen to January's book on this launch day, and then they will both share in a conversation that we will all get to see. I was just at AWP, and the best conversations happen after the AWPs, where the writers are talking in the bars and the cafes and the crawls. So we're going to get a first look. We're going to be the fly on the wall as Diane and January get to have this conversation. But first, I'll turn it over to Dana Harris Travato, our Director of Development, for our land acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Harris Travato, Director of Development here at CavanKerry Press, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this, our latest in a series of virtual readings to celebrate our new and forthcoming releases. Before we begin, we did want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we occupy in Bergen County, New Jersey, belongs to the Lenape people. We honor their history. We cannot function in our work as arts activists, nor offer all writers a safe space without understanding the struggle for Indigenous rights. Also, we join arts organizations across the country to celebrate Black History Month and honor the contributions that all Black authors have made to the development of American literature and culture. We encourage all of you to support a more equitable and inclusive publishing industry by purchasing their works wherever they're published, not only in February, but all year long. And we thank you. And with that, I turn it back over to our Director of Marketing and Communications, Dimitri Reyes, to introduce our guests tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. And this is also a moment before I give the bios of our readers and turn it over to Diane, that if you have any comments that you want to mention to either one of our authors, please put it in the chat box. The authors will be receiving a printout of the chat after the reading. I know that they won't be able to get questions in here from you this time, but it's really great for them to hear the praise, especially when they're in the middle of doing the reading and then the conversation. They can't look at the chat box that often. So it really gives them an extra smile even the day after the reading to look at all the beautiful comments that you have to say. So to begin, I will be reading Diane Seuss, who will be conducting this evening's bio. Diane Seuss is the author of 5 previous poetry collections, including Frank Sonnets, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and the Penn Volkner Award. She lives in rural Michigan. And then we have January Gill O'Neil, our star-studded poet of the evening. January Gill O'Neil is an associate professor at Salem State University and the author of Rewilding 2018, Misery Islands 2014, and Underlife 2009, all published by CavanKerry Press. The former executive director of the Massachusetts Poetry Festival, she currently serves as the AWP's board of directors. Her poem at the rededication of the Emmett Till Memorial was a co-winner of the 2022 Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award. The recipient of fellowships from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, Cave Canem, and the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund. O'Neil was also the 2019 to 2020 John and Renee Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi. I will now be zooming myself out and zooming Diane out, and I'm turning it over to these two lovely authors. Take it away, folks.
Thank you. I want to make sure everyone can hear me. Okay, good. Um, well, this is a launch activity for Glitter Road, and that's what I want to support. And the way that we thought we would move forward tonight is that I want to just say a few things about the book and then offer the space to January, to read some poems to us. And then we're going to have a conversation about the book, and who knows, we may even talk about sonnets.
Woo-hoo.
Okay. um, so here we go. So one thing that strikes me about this glittersome book is, for want of a better word, it's adulthood. There's never a high or a claiming of joy, which is a trope in the book, without a reminder of the imminence of complexity coming right around the corner. This is the voice of a Black woman poet who has survived and lived to tell the tale, for whom, quoting the book's epigraph, joy is an act of resistance. Her choice of subjects is an object lesson in how to design a book with intersectional subjects. So there's marriage and divorce and death and motherhood, which is a value at the center of the book's world. And there's new love, less prescribed and maybe hotter than first love or marriage. And then interwoven is an authentically rendered contemporary America. It's very uncivil, civil wars, and the reverberations of history. Emmett Till's lynching at the center in her experience of the contemporary South, which is never far from the South of the past. There is not necessarily an arc that catapults us toward resolution, but a layering of simultaneous feelings, memories, unresolvable histories, and yes, joy. She gives us the extended metaphor in the book's final poem, which is also its title poem, Glitter Road, in which the speaker drives along a trail of glitter in the roadway. This is her. I think of cars passing through this moment, their undercarriages aglow with possibility. Hard not to feel good riding a glistening wave. My tires now bespeckled with a purple sheen that's tough to rid or wash away. The road ahead made beautiful by this temporary shine. Jan gives us not the mythic pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but the rainbow itself, its glittering striations, each band holding its own space. A miracle, they call it, and then it disappears. I'm so excited to hear January Gill O'Neil read from Glitter Road. And here she is.
Oh, thank you, Diane. That was lovely. I have a line in a poem, about, having your poems read back to you and it feeling like, you're somebody's holding a mirror up to you in the best lighting. And that's really what your words sounded like today. So thank you. I feel like I just could just end right now, but I won't. So thank you all for coming. This is amazing. And I'm so happy with Glitter Road. It just, we've been talking and talking about it forever, and now it's here. And, it's the day after my birthday. I'm 55 now. So I'm just like, AWP was last week. I mean, goodness, I'm so excited about what's to come. My thanks to Diane. I'm so excited for Modern Poetry, which will be out in the next few weeks. Thank you to CavanKerry. to Dimitri and Dana and Gabe and Joan and everybody who puts in the effort tomorrow. Also to Mind the Bird Media and Heather, who's helped me plot a few things, and Creative Collective, who's our group here locally. And shout out to the Thursday Poets. You know who you are. You can't do this walk alone. So I don't claim that space without friends, and all of those folks are friends. So I thought I'd read a few poems, and I'll talk a little bit in between, and then get to our conversation as soon as I can. Um, so so Glitter Road started out as a much different vision, but in the beginning, it all started with a phone call saying, from Derek Harrell, who was at the University of Mississippi, saying, "We want to welcome you as the 2019-2020 John and Renee Grisham Writer in Residence." And that fellowship changed my life. I don't think of myself as somebody who gets called those types of calls for these mysterious awards and grants that just happen, but that one did. So I took my teenagers, out of their schools and put them into Mississippi high schools, and we did the transition, and they got a puppy out of it, who, by the way, may start barking at any moment. So we went down, and with open eyes. I didn't do any writing really until towards the end of our time. I was really about making sure the kids were settled in their high school and the adjustment. We had a great space that we could be in. Before we arrived, there were a few things that happened that gave us pause, though. The marker for Emmett Till's memorial was shot up, and there's a photo of 3 Old Miss students standing next to this sign with bullet holes in it, and they're grinning, and they've got their automatic weapons. I'm thinking about the tragedy in Kansas City, so it's probably an unfair connection, but um, gun violence is everywhere. That happened, as well as there was a statue on campus. It was a 30-foot statue of a Confederate soldier that had been there for 100 years that needed to be moved. So every time somebody came into campus, there was this giant reminder of slavery in the middle of this school that is really trying to honor the past and look towards the future. So we were, of course, nervous about going, but we went and had an amazing time down there. And what I like to say about Mississippi is that, it is nothing like you expect, and then it is exactly what you would expect. So I'm just going to read a few poems about my time down there and move to more joyful work. So this poem was taken from an article in USA Today. 3 Old Miss students used guns to vandalize a memorial to lynching victim Emmett Till. They pose their bodies as if they've just bagged their first 10-point buck. One holds a shotgun, another squats below the shot up sign, a third stands with an AR-15. 3 faces smiling, hoisting guns in front of a bullet-ridden marker. This is the site where Till's body was removed from the river. It is hunter's hours. The sign's jagged holes could slice a finger. Those students are someone's sons or brothers, not much older than the young Black boy, his body beaten, tethered to a 75-pound cotton gin fan, and thrown into the Tallahatchie. This is an old story, a Southern Gothic. To deny this boy's life and then deny the marker that says he lived breaks me every time. The camera captures the night's dark cover, the tall grasses, the momentary flash illuminating their shit-eating grins. and the gun barrels glint, lifetimes of getting away with it. And so I can't help but think about my son who, is now 20, and walking in these spaces, and how that connection of Emmett Till and all of the young Black boys who are beaten, um, thrown away to a certain extent, how we walk with that. That doesn't leave us. And that Emmett Till story, I feel, has a loose connection to what is happening just in general. So, in thinking about the Capitol Hill riots, which happened on January 6th, 2021, I was in Mississippi a few days after. Driving through Mississippi after the Capitol Hill riots, January 9th, 2021. And when that country dog blocked the car, snarling, put his body in front of the front tire, it stopped us from passing on an otherwise quiet afternoon. The winter grass, a pale yellow, new brick houses threading through a 2-lane road on our way to someplace else. That dog, maybe a Feist or a red heeler, coat of dark amber, rust dog, all bark, all bite, unchained, perhaps for the first time today, would not be moved. America, haven't we been here before? Standing our ground in failing light, our breaths held, not knowing what will happen next. The texture of this moment turning so hard, so fast. That dog, flushed with adrenaline and a loud, echoing bark, teeth clenched towards whatever comes down the road. And so we were in Mississippi for an academic year. So for the first 7 months, we learned about the area, the culture, the community, um, went into the Delta, drove across the state, visited Jackson, Mississippi, um, and really tried to embed ourselves into the culture. And then COVID hit. In fact, we came back to Massachusetts and we were here in March 2020 and then went back and then we were in lockdown. So I didn't get a chance to do one of the things that I really wanted to do, which is take a canoe ride on the Mississippi. So we went back in 2021 and we were able to leave out of Clarksdale, Mississippi, and do about a 6 or 7 mile canoe and spend the day out there. And it was just fascinating. The river remembers. Here, the water is silt brown, stretches mile wide, flat as a washed out conveyor belt, an unhemmed rumble strip. I can't read the river, can't see my hand when it plunges elbow deep to feel the cool against the Mississippi heat, hot as a dog's mouth. Here we canoe for hours through swirling eddies, watch the trash barges and towboats travel downstream. The river glistens hard as broken glass. Here, everything is fluid. In lower Mississippi, the South, where the 2-lane blacktop cuts through an infinity of flat, cotton, soybean, corn, farm, tumble-down shack, creeks and rivers bifurcate the land like blood veins. Here, the GPS gives up. New islands form at the current's whim, and what is untouched grows lush and verdant. Willow and privet border the collapsing coastline. A carp leaps into the boat when it hears us coming. We stop here in an oxbow. Gumbo mud sticks to our feet. River rock, plastic, fossils, gar. Raccoon and coyote leave tracks in rust-colored sand. The slaves, sold down the river, hid here, waited for their chance to escape up north, hid in caves, fled to the Twin Cities and Canada, their fate at the mercy of the river's next rise. Here's the nadir of our suffering, which started in one place to end in another. Here's where flow and marvel and history converge, this harm joy, this beautiful sadness. So I like to say that, as with as much, pain and trauma that remains from the legacy of slavery, there is a lot of beauty and joy. And so while we were down there, I also met my boyfriend, who is not on this Zoom right now, but we've been dating ever since long distance, ever since I left Mississippi. So we called this time our Mississippi season. And that was the title of the book, but Glitter Road just seemed to make a better title. So I'm going to read this poem for him. Mississippi season. Oh, Kate is here. Hey, Kate, how are you? He says I hold my mind well, likes that I put my kids first and have never tried drugs. The lilt in his southern drawl intoxicates me. He likes not being able to have all of me, makes him want me more. Broken finds broken, I say. So when he kisses my neck, along my clavicle, down to my breast, I break all over again. After a drought of no kissing, no touch. How not being chosen can dim any light. For years, I told myself a story I could live with, thought of myself a kind of carnival fish in a plastic bag, floating in my own still water, waiting to be loved. Dumb luck that someone flips a red ring on the mouth of a glass jar, and just like that, I am kissing again, kissing a man so luminous, so beautifully flawed, I can barely look at him. And my mind, done with all its stories, turns to the carnal as I rim the hinge of his lips with my tongue and dive into this quenching. And so one of the, one of my fondest memories is where we stayed. And because it was the John Grisham residency, John Grisham supported, the entire fellowship. So he donated a house and property for the fellowship. So that's where I was. It was on the outskirts of town, relatively remote. And I mean, it's a wonderful house, but it needed some updates here and there. But only a few of us can say this. I slept in John Grisham's bed. A bed on stilts, queen-sized, with a well in the center I'd always roll into. White-pilled sheets, threadbare and thinning. I worked hard to earn that bed and the room surrounding it, meaning I must have written words once that meant something. Big wide windows look out into a cluster of magnolias that never lose their leaves. No blinds. I like to let the light in. I imagine John Grisham plotting out a bestseller, legal pad in hand, kids like mine bouncing on a mattress high enough to touch the ceiling fan. This bed I have shared with many authors and lovers who also wrote words that meant something. They slept here, loved here too, on this bed that scoots away from the wooden headboard from too much movement. Can't help but laugh at the bedroom door that does not lock, sliding a chair in front of it for privacy, or the attic we were afraid to enter, the creak of the floorboards above our heads. And when I think my big thoughts about the world, time travel, or black holes, or God, or death, I come to the bed's blank page against the shimmer of sky glow. I actually at some point, maybe it was at AWP, I talked to Maurice Ruffin, who was the Grisham Fellow after me, And I had sent him a copy of the book, and we just laughed. Yeah, that bed is still the same. Okay, and I will just finish with an American sonnet. Um, so over the course of you know, eh, I guess April of 2021, I was writing American sonnets then, and Diane was a huge influence, and her book Frank, and all of my friends. So um, because we like challenges and it was COVID and we didn't have much to do, we were like, well, let's write a poem a day for the month of April. And we were all kind of fascinated with the American sonnet. So my friends who were on Cindy Veach and Jen Martelli, we all wrote poems. Um, we all wrote sonnets that month, and we were using Diane Seuss's Frank. We were using Terrence Hayes's American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. I was looking at Wanda Coleman. I love kind of the complication of what the American sonnet can be. So it sort of has outgrown what we know as traditional. And with that turn and the volta, I mean, there's a lot of energy and power there. So um, during this particular stretch, we were writing our poems, some with success, some without. And we all came across this article about this woman who was swallowed by a python in Thailand. So each of us have poems, American sonnets about that. I think we've all published. So this is my version to that. Woman swallowed by a python in her cornfield. Inside every woman is a snake. Some think I'm a hoax or an oddity, rarer than winning Powerball or being struck by lightning. Everything has a form, even doubt. Think of me as someone you've met in a dream. Green stalks shade the sun, keep me hidden from the villagers, the non-believers. To find me, you must enter me. Oh, that your body fits into my body makes us unholy. Let me press my mouth to your scar, run my tongue along your flesh so I can taste how you wound. The wild boars patrolling the edges won't save you. Footprints, flashlight, machete, slippers, all that I've left behind. Inside every woman is a snake. I'm sorry, inside every snake is a woman. That's the part of me I love the most. Reticulated constrictor, word made flesh, time unfolding, lore or legend. I am done telling the kinder story. I am a myth of my own making. Part my snake flesh, and you will find me intact, clothed as I was when I visited the corn. Think of me as the gift you're unsure how to open. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful reading. I'm going to turn my little light on here so I can show up.
Thank you.
What a beautiful reading. So that poem and many of the poems in the book, I notice you often come at a poem via a piece of popular culture. We have Tina Turner, we have Oprah, we have Kamala Harris. Your book is really seated with what is right now. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how is that an in for you?
Right. I think that is really sort of a process thing that I do and not something I consciously think about. In fact, you know, many of my poems feel like, at least the drafts, maybe even the ones that don't get published, are nature poems. And they're really, I'm sitting out and looking at my bird feeder. That was certainly like the theme in my, during the COVID phase, especially when we weren't going anywhere. So, in order to, I sometimes I think my poems are boring, and so I don't even see myself really putting in pop culture references. But when you list them like that, I guess I do. But yeah, those are things that resonate with me, and I don't mind writing poems that sort of plant us in a certain time. You know, I know growing up, the convention was you want to be careful about your references because, in 50 years, who's going to know what, so and so is. But, I don't subscribe to that anymore. I want to write for now. And I hope that maybe people are reading my poems in the future, but who knows what people will be interested in. And so I value that as a way in. I mean, sometimes when I get stuck, a good newspaper article, something
Mhm,
weird, migration of bees or, horseshoe crabs that are being used for, you know, COVID testing and, just, and Kim Kardashian, although I haven't written one about her yet. But yeah, that is a way in for me. And
mhm.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was especially interested in the Tina Turner one, "What's Love Got to Do with It?" Which is one of your themes, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the complicating love that comes when you're, no longer a kid, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
How is that working through this book? I wanna just comment on the look of this book,
Ooh,
because it's so pretty, and
shiny.
there's this glitter road down this gold ribbon down the cover, and then the section, breaks have,
Mhm.
this road. It's really a beautiful design. So, it captures the s s the circuitous route for you of love, and I wonder if you can just talk about that a little bit in terms of, when you think about this book, if somebody said, "What's this book's subject?" Would
Mm.
you say love?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I would say joy, but I would say, also with pain, right?
Mhm,
Because you can't have one without the other. As far as, one thing I do love about this book is how everything seems to work together and you really don't know until you get a finished product. And so I know that we were searching for cover designs, but we came back to this Mississippi meander map on the cover. And I mean, we were looking at literal references to a road and glitter. And, I think MP Carver's on, we had played around a little bit with AI early before it was a big deal. And we were like, well, let's see what a glitter road looks like. And it looks about as
mhm,
bad as you might imagine. But, we needed something to look at. So this Mississippi meander map, there are 15. And it was created by the Army Corps of Engineers. And there's a little note because there's a poem in the back called The Map. So there's a note that goes along with it and talks about the cover. And so this is map number 7. And I liked it because these are all of the currents and pearls and meanders of the Mississippi over millennia. And
mm,
each color is a representation of its path. And we pulled out one to sort of highlight that idea of a road and just to make it stand out. Um, so it is a non-literal description of a road. Um, but it does. I mean, love is complicated. Kind of looks like it reminds me a little bit of a heart, or at least the veins and arteries going in and out of one. So, I like that you can look at and interpret it, in several different ways. We got lucky that way with the cover design, and yeah, I guess it was a little complicated to put the the book together for all those reasons that you listed. It was,
mhm,
talking about Emmett Till, talking about love, talking about nature, talking about, family. It was difficult, and I didn't want. How do you highlight everything? How do you give everything all the poems and topics their own space?
mhm.
And I,
I
you
think you do it. I think you've done it, and as I was saying in the introduction, it's like bands. It's not, you know, it's the bands of the rainbow, none of which compete with the other, so it's sort of layered,
know,
but they all do comment on and sort of move fluidly. The river, I think, is a really good, image in this book for the way it's structured.
mhm.
Th They're all leading into and out of each other.
Yeah. I'll also mention that my boyfriend Cade and I also have two large maps. He has one, I have one. So we're 1,300 miles away, but we have this map art up. So it's symbolic for us in a lot of ways.
Mm, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved listening in on the relationship. And there's something about love and touch when you're not 25 that is a whole other journey.
I remember I was talking with Erica Meitner, and I can't remember if it's for the her latest work or the book before, but when we were talking about our project, she was trying to define, and she was trying to create a new definition of womanhood. And that really resonated. And I was like, well, what does that mean for me? And what does it mean for a Black woman of a certain age? So I had that in the back of my mind too. My kids are older now, so I don't have, I'm not chasing them around or, watching basketball games or bake sales. And I have a new relationship, and at a once you are a certain age, I think for a lot of us, we find our strength and our durability, and we know what we can do and what we won't stand for and what we'll fight for. And I think all of that is in this book somehow.
Yeah, it is. I think so. When you were putting the manuscript together, once you had the poems,
Mhm.
how did you determine structure? This is something I think it's a really fun or challenging part of putting a book together, but everybody sort of approaches it differently.
Mhm.
I mean, you start the book with a poem called Autopsy. What a
Mhm.
beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And you end with the title poem, Glitter Road.
Mhm.
And there are how many sections?
That's a good question. Like five, and then the
Yeah,
main.
5 sections maybe.
Yeah.
And they're not the sections aren't like, here is the section on X. Here,
Right.
they're fluid. So how did you conceptualize of the order of this book?
Well, the book certainly went through a few iterations. And I had always put my books together. My model for putting together books was Sharon Olds, because I studied with her, and I often think we write and we do things based on what our teachers have told us. And
Mm,
that formula had worked for me. How, the sections for my previous books had maybe an outward facing tone, and then they moved to something more personal, and then maybe something that's more sexual in nature, and then they sort of end on the other side, and that just did not work for this book. So
mm.
many people on this Zoom have played with it, but the two people who probably have the biggest influence is Susan Rich, who looked at the manuscript probably one of the last go rounds, and Baron Wormser, who uh, who has edited all of my books. So Susan helped me get the order, and she was like, you should put Autopsy first. Now I have a lot of apprehension about that one because it's such a personal one, and it is me saying some unsayable things in that poem. So um, it's the first poem in the book.
So
um,
why did Susan think that should go first?
I almost want to ask Susan why she should think that one goes.
Susan, get your ass up here. Yeah. Yeah, why do you think it should go first, Jan?
Well, it made sense. I mean, I couldn't find a compelling argument, and we had found we tried a few different iterations, but that was really a powerful one. And I have to say, she has a good sense of my work, and she's really good at organizing manuscripts. So thank you, Susan.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's a hook. It was a hook for me. I
yeah.
opened the book to Autopsy. Maybe it's because I'm goth, but I thought, okay, here I am.
Right, right,
um, and there's a mystery to that poem that's very
right.
inviting.
Right. Well, I mean, I am talking my so my divorced in 2010, and my ex-husband passed away suddenly in 2016.
Hmm.
And Mabel, that's my dog. I
Mabel
may
has a
I may
comment
have to
on
give
that.
her a dog bone for this one. But it was, that's a poem that I wrote, and I'm very proud of the poem, but it is a real, you know, edgy poem. And yeah, it made sense for the front of the book,
Mhm.
but it was an uncomfortable one. I always say, I tell my students, it's okay to write the poems you want to write, but publishing is a different thing. And I published that poem, and I figured if it were in the middle of the book, it would be fine. But
You could hide it.
yes, no, I didn't. It's right out there. So it's out there. So I'm really close to my husband's my ex-husband's family. So I am
Mhm.
hoping that they are okay with it.
Mhm.
It is certainly written with love, but for me, it's one of those, if poems or pictures, then this is like one of the big ones that I carry with me.
Mhm.
So I'm proud of it, but I'm like, oh, it's like when people can, see behind the veil and they lift the curtain. I'm like, that's one of those poems. So it's a
Mhm.
very vulnerable poem for me.
And to start a book with vulnerability is brave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's
Mhm.
like terrifying.
It is. It's terrifying. It is. I mean, poetry is terrifying if
Yes.
you're doing it right, you
Right.
know?
But
Mhm.
but just to comment on the rest of the order also, when I turned it into CavanKerry, if I'm being honest, I shopped at other places just to see what would happen. And I got great feedback, like the individual poems were good, but we can't see, where it's going.
Mhm.
And CavanKerry was great about taking it. It's like, "Well, we'll take it no matter what you wanna do with it, but we'll turn it over to Barron and see what he says." And fortunately, he was like, "Well, let's separate out some of the Mississippi poems and give them their own space." So we create these mini sections.
Mhm.
And so they're separated by magnolias. And I love that my daughter designed the magnolia in there. So
Mm.
she's in art school now, but she was in high school then. So that is probably my favorite part of the book. So all those magnolias that are separating the chapters, that was done by Ella.
Oh, Ella, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. How wonderful, how intimate.
thank you.
I was thinking, how would this book be different if you were raised in the South?
Mm. Well, I was raised in the South. I'm from
Oh,
Virginia,
okay. So
but
where were you
but
raised?
I was raised in Virginia, but in Norfolk, Virginia, which is where the naval base is. So we don't have the same the same monuments, the same, you know, it's just different there. I mean, if you go to
Mhm.
other parts like the western part of the state, you will see at least then you would see your Confederate flags and your Civil War monuments and stuff. A lot of that is still there. Charlottesville just, started taking theirs down. So,
Mm.
um but Virginia is very military based, so there was always a big influx of people. So there was a lot of World War II memorabilia. So it was just sort of a different vibe there. But
Mhm.
going down, and I have relatives in Atlanta. My mom's from Atlanta, so I
Mm.
spent a lot of time in the South. Um, but Mississippi was it was different. It was, and
Mhm.
sometimes I think because they've been dealing with these issues for so long. I mean, I think the lines are a little clearer.
Mm.
Up in Massachusetts, which, I love the state, but, I'll get hit with a microaggression here or there, and I get surprised by it every
Mm.
time it happens. Like Massachusetts is not any more beyond, um, you know, the racial divides as anywhere else. I mean, I think we're, much better off than some places, but we haven't totally eliminated. This is no,
Mhm.
paradise up here either. But there are a lot of wonderful things about this state. There's a lot I like about Mississippi. I mean, it's everywhere. Racism is insidious. It's bigotry, and we're living in a time where people say and do kind of whatever they want to, without, impunity these days.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, we had somebody in charge who made it the thing to do,
right, right.
to spew.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, when I asked that question, I wasn't sure where you were raised, but
Mhm.
um, it seemed like you sort of went in with the curiosity and energy of somebody who was exploring a place for the first time, but also had this deep, almost was rediscovering a deep old connection.
Yeah. I loved being in Mississippi, and I go down there a few times a year. I'm still learning about the area and like to explore more. I feel like every time I go down, I discover a new part of myself. And it's interesting because I don't have that feeling about Virginia. I don't have a lot of I love Virginia. I'm spending more and more time there with my mom, but um, I don't have that same curiosity. It might just be because of the circumstance, to totally get away and not have the responsibility of home. So the fellowship offered that. I wasn't in my regular job. I wasn't in my regular surroundings. So everything was a wonder to me.
That comes through in the
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
A wonder in all ways, not just positive, but
yeah,
a wonder in every way.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. Um, th- there's a poem in the book, Cartwheel,
Mm.
where you turn a cartwheel, and I'm impressed.
Want me to
And
do it now? I will. Usually I will. My
well, and
superpower.
I'm wondering, could you read just the last stanza of that poem?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is page 30.
In your
Okay.
hymnal.
Sure. So the last stanza. Back straight, tummy tucked, my stance wide and precise as I wager a bet on myself. What I want to say is this. All this time, I have been able to balance my little life in my hands. That I go through the turn and keep landing on my feet is a goddamn miracle.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the single mother in me, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And when I read that poem and read those lines at the end over and over again, I couldn't help but think of the legacy of Lucille Clifton
Mm,
in her poem that ends, "Every day something has tried to kill me
yes.
and has failed."
Yeah.
Um, so, this is a poem that foregrounds that kind of resilience.
Mm,
Every
yes.
day something has tried to kill me and has failed.
Yeah.
And it are a goddamn miracle, right?
Well,
So, well, you are.
well,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, to be in the same sentence with Lucille Clifton is an honor in itself. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I felt that connection through this book in many ways.
Mm,
Um, the willingness to just to
mm,
say it, you
yeah.
know?
A big part of what I wanted to do, well, I don't know if I can't say that, you never really have the intention to do it, but I feel strongly about saying those unsayable things. So whether it's autopsy or whether it's cartwheel, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those are the lines I learned. Those are probably the most true lines, for me. I mean, like that's how I feel. So it's liberating to kind of say some of those things and to own that power. That's
Yes.
that's the kind of writing I'm gravitating to. That's why I loved Frank so much, you
Well,
know?
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. At a certain point, it becomes essential to
Mhm.
tell the truth.
Yeah.
When you do that, when you write, it's a goddamn miracle, or, whatever in this book,
Mhm.
do you think of a reader receiving that? Do you think of it as a message to a reader, or do you think of it as a claim that you need to make about yourself?
I guess I'm pretty selfish in that way. I write these poems for me, and I
Hmm.
I don't I don't think about the reader. If I did, I probably, a poem like Autopsy probably wouldn't have made it in the book. But yeah, I write for me. I write for to please myself. I have to live with these poems. It is a goddamn miracle that anybody reads them. But you know, I I enjoy the craft of it, and I enjoy making, and I also enjoy being in fellowship with other writers too.
Mm.
So I don't do this alone. I'm not the type of writer who can write a poem and then, work with it and then it's done and send it off. I really do need other people to sort of say, well, you've done this before, or, maybe you should try this line. And my circle is really good about that,
Mm.
you know.
When did you start writing? What was the moment that you sort of think back and think, oh, that's where I became a writer?
So, I'm not sure if I can say that. I can tell you that when I Toy Derricott, who the dedication of the book is for her, that quote about joy being an act of resistance. She was my first teacher, and she introduced me to Allen Ginsberg and Sharon Olds, and I was hooked. I don't know if I felt I was a writer as an undergrad student. I was at Old Dominion University in Virginia, and I went to grad school in New York and studied with Sharon and Galway Cannell and Phil Levine. I think Phil made me think I was a writer. Phil
Mm,
didn't like a lot of people, but he
I
liked,
know.
yeah, he liked me. He liked Joseph Legaspi because we were in the same class. He liked our friend Fabius Etienne, who is not with us anymore. But in our group, he liked us. And so we liked him because he liked us. And we wanted to, we wanted to. We were nervous. What are we going to do after this? How are we going to make this work as writers? And it took us a long time to find our footing, but we finally did. And so, I'm not even sure if I can remember the first poem I published, which is,
Mm,
I think there was a street fair going on in New York, and Literal Latte had a contest,
mm-hmm.
where if you wrote a poem on the spot, and turned it in, you could win. And I think I won that. I'm not sure how many other people turned in poems. So that might have
Cool.
been my first publication.
How was New York after Virginia?
It was great. I always think that I went New York. No, I went so Virginia. It took me a little bit to New York. I didn't go right to grad school. So I was
Mm-hmm.
in DC for a few years.
Mm,
And then I went to New York I was I was like a few years older. So I was like in my late 20s when I went, but I had full-time work. And so
mm-hmm.
I was, that made it easier. I loved it. That's the New York I love, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And, I visit New York now and it's still the New York. I mean, it was, you know, um, I think the let's see, National Poetry Month. I think that started in '96. So I was there. I remember going to the new school and hearing James Tate say something about National Poetry Month and saying every month is National Poetry Month. And he was saying that, back in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. Um, we we went to the Dodge Festival because our teacher said you should go. And so Joseph and I have been going since 1996, and we make a pilgrimage to do it. So you know, New York was just as it always is. It's alive. I wanted to go to New York because at the time, that the adage is you're going to be a writer, you need to go to New York, and it was perfect for me because I could leave.
Yeah.
I love New York. I love visiting, but I didn't want to live there. But I had my time there, and that was fundamental.
Mm. Yeah, I was there a lot earlier,
Hmm.
because I'm older than you, damn it. Um, but, and I was really young when I went to New York, but yeah, I knew that I couldn't stay.
Hmm.
I couldn't find a horizon line, and I didn't know what to do about that. And it was a very fraught place to be, but it also is like the epicenter of so much of my work that
Hmm.
if I'd skipped it, I don't know what I'd be, you know?
I think we'd both be writers, but we would be different
Yeah,
kinds
we
of writers
probably would,
without the
yes.
New York experience.
Well, I have one more question, and then maybe we could finish up with um, each of us reading a poem.
That would
How
be
is
great.
that cool?
Hmm.
Um, okay, so I have to decide which of my questions I want to end with. Um, oh, um, so Oh boy, I have two. Maybe I'll try to rush and ask both. So in Postbellum, that poem you write,
Mhm,
to love the magnolia and
mhm,
lament the smell. I
mhm,
love that line.
mm,
This place is not finished with me.
mhm.
And then let's see, in you also coined the compound word harm joy in the river remembers.
Mhm.
And so I just thought of, there's a sweet spot you sort of define in the book, and harm joy is a perfect term for
Mm,
it.
mhm, mhm,
And the loving the flower but lamenting the smell,
mhm.
both of those sort of um, compound binaries that we often, make opposites. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I like the gray area,
Hmm.
writing, I like that in between, that absence and presence, that the struggle. I like that wonderment, and I like poems that have it in there. So, joy and pain on the, two sides of the same coin. So I guess that makes sense for harm joy, and to love the magnolia, and despise the scent. I actually love magnolias, but that feeling of, you know, um, loving what the South has to offer and knowing how we got here.
Yes,
To
yes,
to
yes.
walk
And
around and
look
feel
at
that
how much
feeling.
work that line does,
Yeah.
just that line. It's a
Mm.
brilliant line because it does so much of that work for you.
Oh, thank you.
And then
Thank you.
harm joy. I mean, it's like it's like a pocketbook you could put the whole book in.
Mm.
So, those are those moments when in my reading of this book that I was just like, yeah, you know.
Thank you. I will confess about harm joy. So, Elon Musk has ruined Twitter for most.
Everything, I
Yeah.
know.
But there was this site that I used to go to all the time called the New York Times, and you can probably still find, their site up on Twitter. But they would publish first time words in the New York Times. So sometimes they were typos, but I'm pretty sure Harmjoy came out of that. So I wish I could say
Interesting.
it was completely. So yeah, a lot of, interesting words, that like green space we take for granted, but having it written as a compound noun, and so a lot of typos, a lot of things like the first time it ends up gets on that list. But I was looking at it because sometimes I get bored with my own knowledge of language. So it's not Urban Dictionary or anything, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's just fun to go and look and see what words are out there, and to just imagine.
Well,
So
it was perfect for this book.
thank you.
In Mississippi Season, which you also read, you write, and my mind, done with all its stories,
Hmm.
turns to the carnal.
Yeah.
So, I asked in this question, is this the bottom line of the book? Because you do not end there. You do not end there. You end with Glitter Road,
Because I'm
and
an
that's a solo act. You're in the car and you're driving the Glitter Road.
artist.
So, is it both and?
Oh. Yeah, I guess so. Yes, we don't make these journeys alone, and I mean, for a long time, I was alone, and so now I have somebody to share this road. Somebody else pointed out that I have a lot of driving poems in the book, so there's that too.
Mhm.
Transitions and changes. That's a part of the meanders, and the you know and the way the fluid motion of the book, I think.
Do maybe I'll skip a poem, and you want to read Glitter Road for us?
I do. I don't know. Dimitri, can we get in? Can I read and Diane read also? Do we have time for that?
Go for it.
All right.
I'll do something real short.
I'll read, and then Diane can end, and I'll read Glitter Road. Glitter Road. I'll take my miracles however they appear these days. A salamander poking its head above the bricks, the shocking blue overcoat of the season's first bluebird, a spider web unbroken. At the corner of Molly Bar and McElroy, I saw a thick trail of glitter in the curve of the right turn lane. Fuchsia, heavy shimmer refracting the noonday sun as if laying flat a rainbow's extracted hue. Not paint or blood or a parade shedding its cheer. It's the faded streak of eyeshadow as it trails into flecks, then disappears. I think of cars passing through this moment, their undercarriages aglow with possibility. Hard not to feel good riding a glistening wave, my tires now bespeckled with a purple sheen that's tough to rid or wash away. The road ahead made beautiful by this temporary shine.
Mm.
Mhm. Thank you.
Oh, that's such a good poem.
Thank you.
I
Thank
sort of hate to follow it because everything I write is such a downer.
you. Well, I think it's real and I love it. And I think we'd all love to hear from you.
Thank you. Well, let's see. Um,
I have a question for you, but I don't want to distract you while you're
oh,
looking.
go ahead.
Um, After writing so many sonnets, was it hard to write longer poems? I think, if I remember correctly, like the poem Modern Poetry is a long poem.
Yes, modern poetry is full of longer poems,
Mhm,
although there are some shorter poems sort of that land in between,
mhm.
uh, those movements, I guess, of the longer poems. It was hell. It was hell to turn to longer poems.
I bet.
It was like moving on from a divorce, I had to kiss the sonnet goodbye. And
Mm,
for me, my process is always, I need to move from whatever I just did to something that's challenging. And
mm,
for me, that in many ways, that was free verse and longer and not writing within forms, although I do have some funky ballads in modern
mm,
poetry that I
mhm,
experimented with.
mm.
So I'm sure I'll be told on Twitter that I don't know anything about the ballad.
Well, I think I speak for most everybody in the Zoom room that we are ready to defend you
Oh,
and we've all, we you have expanded what the sonic can do. And that is not, hyperbole. I mean, it really was a big influence on me and just the idea of how many complications, how many things can you put in a sonnet? Um,
yeah, that for me it was an experiment, and it wasn't a manifesto. It was an
yeah,
experiment.
right.
So I'll read a poem not from modern poetry, but from Frank,
Mhm.
since you've raised it. And I'll read this one. And I'm going to dedicate it to you. And thank you for
Wow.
including me in this. And congratulations on
Oh,
Glitter Road.
thank you. Thank you.
The sonnet, like poverty, teaches you what you can do without. To have, as my mother says, a wish in one hand and shit in another. That was an answer to I wish I had an Instamatic camera and a father. Wish in one hand, she said, shit in another. She still says it. When she tells me she wishes I were there to have some of her bean soup, she answers herself. Wish in one hand, she says, shit in another. Poverty, like a sonnet, is a good teacher. The kind that wraps your knuckles with a ruler, but not the kind that throws a dictionary across the room and hits you in the brain with all the words that ever were. Boxed fathers buried deep are still fathers, teacher says. Do without without and, without hot dogs in your baked beans. A sonnet is a mother. Every word a silver dollar. Shit in one hand, she says, wish in another.
Mm, that is my favorite of your
Oh,
poems. It really, I teach it in class, so thank you.
I'm so glad. I think shit and wish are like harm joy, you know?
Oh, baby, yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Diane. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for, I know it's hard to be sometimes to be questioned. You're like, oh no, now what? But I really loved having this conversation with you. So again, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Diane. Oh, we're so
Mhm.
looking forward to modern poetry. So
Thank you. I'll be doing some readings and hopefully maybe we can read together down the road. That would be fun.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, everyone. What I'm actually
Thanks,
gonna
everyone.
do, I'm gonna thank you so much, ladies. This was impeccable. I'm gonna actually ask all to unmute so they can give their own applauses and their own goodbyes. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, Jan. And Jan, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, CavanKerry. Thank you.
Woo!
Thanks, Diane.
Woo!
Oh,
Oh, you guys were
Woo!
great.
Wonderful.
Really
Thank you
great and
so much.
inspiring too.
Thank you.
Amazing. So,
Yeah.
so amazing.
thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm getting the
Wonderful
book
job.
and looking forward to
Beautiful.
modern poetry.
Yeah.
Can't
Yes.
wait. Thank you.
Jan,
Wonderful.
kisses to everyone.
Thank you,
Really
everyone.
wonderful. Thank you.